Here you doing? The news of brutality or fatality by police officer in the United States is oftentimes reported by Japanese news media as well, and I think I know it to some extent. And there is almost invariably the picture of why police officer versus black suspects crossing people's mind in the background of the incident. And the incident that why police officer arrested black people is almost the subject of racism against black people by white police officer in American society. And some of black American seems to believe that unjustified infringement of human rights based on racism by a police officer exists in the United States. And sadly, in some cases, there were actually terrible tragedy that approached police officers with discriminatory sentiment in their deep mind caused fatality in American society. And recently, there is there there was a news that 20-year-old black guy was shot by a white female police officer in April this year in Minnesota, and he was finally dead, sadly. And in this incident, this 20-year-old guy had already arrest warrant, and this police officer tried to capture him, but he tried to escape from this police officer by peeling out by car all of a sudden. And the female police officer held a gun at the ready and shot him. And after this incident, this police officer confessed that she took a gun for a taser. In terms of this incident, appropriateness of gun shooting to unarmed suspects has been the point at issue. Some of black community shows serious resentment against this tragedy from the viewpoint of racism. I understand how they feel. However, in my viewpoint, the cause of problem is not always from racism. You know, American people, especially black American people, emphasize too much racism at the cause of incident, and they also persistently emphasize the picture of white police officer versus black suspects, and white police officer always oppresses innocent black citizens. Now, what I feel when I listen to their opinions is that they didn't separately think between the truth of the case, truth of the incident, and the racism. And when I research that most of the cases that happen brutality or fatality in the process of arresting the suspect in the United States, police officers have resorted to the violent means to a person under a certain suspicion who didn't honestly respond to police officers' requests and resisted against police officers and attempted to escape from the police officers. So to black people's credit, I don't mean to stand on police officers' side, but setting aside the question of appropriateness of how they arrested the suspects, thinking instant by approaching to the problem of what the suspect did and why the suspect was wanted by police officer will get closer to the truth of the case, I think. So actually, the incident of brutality of black police officers weren't taken up by black community. So I think the concept of racism crowds people's eye in the process of pursuing the truth of the incident and the case. So as a Japanese, every time I heard such a news recently, black people's protest activity, they just want to apply every single incident, every single case to racism, and they want to believe that every single case can be applied to their accomplished scenario, that incidents were mostly caused by police officers' discriminatory sentiment. So I think the people caught by racism the most is the people joining in anti-racism protests who believe that every single cause all comes from the racist sentiment, I think.